In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a wealthy man's death sparks a scandal. His will leaves everything to a maid, Lucy. Is it a forgery? Greedy nephew Harold, bitter ex-wife Clara, and nervous lawyer Mr. Gray all hide secrets. Join Miss Marple as she unravels lies, exposes a cunning plot, and brings justice in this thrilling mystery. Chapter 1. The Inheritance Announcement. The sun dipped low over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in soft gold. Cottages with neat gardens lined the narrow lanes, and the air smelled of fresh roses and baking bread. Miss Jane Marple sat in her favorite armchair by the window, her knitting needles clicking softly. Her eyes, sharp as ever, watched the world outside. She loved her quiet village, but she knew secrets hid behind its peaceful mask. Today was no ordinary day. The village buzzed with talk about Mr. Reginald Harrington's death. He was a wealthy man, old and grumpy, who lived in the big house on the hill, Harrington Hall. He'd passed away a week ago, and everyone waited to hear about his will. Who would get his money, his grand house, his fancy cars? The village loved a good story, and this one promised to be juicy. Miss Marple had been invited to the will reading at Harrington Hall. It wasn't her usual scene. She preferred her cozy home to grand mansions, but Mrs. Dolly Bantry, her best friend, had insisted. "Jane, you must come," Dolly had said, her eyes wide. "It's going to be a show. The whole family's fighting already." Miss Marple smiled to herself. Dolly loved drama, but Miss Marple loved truth. She tucked her knitting into her bag and set off. Harrington Hall stood tall, with ivy climbing its stone walls. Its windows gleamed, but the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. Inside, the drawing room was packed. Miss Marple slipped into a corner, her gray shawl blending with the shadows. She watched everyone, her mind sharp as a tack. The family was there, all dressed in black, but looking more greedy than sad. First was Harold Harrington, the nephew, a tall man with slick hair and a fake smile. He kept checking his watch, as if he couldn't wait to grab his share. Next was Clara, Mr. Harrington's ex-wife, her lips tight and eyes cold. She'd left him years ago, but still wanted a piece of his fortune. Then there was young Lucy, the maid, who hovered near the door, her hands twisting nervously. She wasn't family, but rumors said Mr. Harrington treated her like a daughter. Could she be in the will? The lawyer, Mr. Percival Gray, stood at the front. He was a thin man with a pointy nose, like a bird ready to peck. His briefcase bulged with papers, and he cleared his throat loudly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are here to read the last will of Mr. Reginald Harrington." The room went quiet. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. Mr. Gray opened the will, a thick document with a red wax seal. He read slowly, his voice dry as dust. The will started with small gifts: a gold watch to the butler, a painting to the local museum. But then came the big news. "The bulk of my estate, including Harrington Hall, my savings, and my investments, goes to Miss Lucy Trent." A gasp ripped through the room. Lucy, the maid, froze, her eyes wide as saucers. Harold's face turned red, and Clara's hands clenched into fists. Miss Marple's knitting needles paused. Interesting, she thought. Lucy, a quiet girl of 20, getting everything. It didn't add up. Harold jumped up. "This is nonsense," he shouted. "Uncle Reginald would never leave his money to a servant. That will's a fake." His voice boomed, and Clara nodded, her eyes sharp as knives. "He's right," she said. "Reginald promised me the house. That signature isn't his." Mr. Gray looked nervous, his hands shaking as he held the will. "I assure you, this is the legal document signed by Mr. Harrington himself." But his voice wobbled, and Miss Marple noticed. She also saw Lucy slip out of the room, tears in her eyes. The poor girl looked scared, not happy. The room exploded into arguments. Harold yelled at Mr. Gray, Clara muttered about lawyers cheating her, and the butler whispered to the cook. Miss Marple stayed quiet, her eyes darting from face to face. She knew greed when she saw it. She'd seen it before in St. Mary Mead and beyond. People lied for money. They even killed for it. Dolly Bantry slid into the seat next to her. "Jane, you won't believe it," she whispered, her cheeks pink with excitement. "Lucy getting everything. I bet Harold's ready to burst." Miss Marple nodded, her lips a thin line. "It's curious, Dolly," she said softly. "Very curious. Why would Mr. Harrington change his will so suddenly? And why Lucy?" Her mind was already turning, piecing together bits of village gossip. She'd heard Mr. Harrington arguing with Harold last month, and Clara had visited him recently, which was odd for an ex-wife. Something wasn't right. As the arguments died down, Mr. Gray packed up his papers. "The will is final," he said, but his eyes avoided the family. He hurried out, leaving chaos behind. Harold stormed off, muttering about lawyers and forgeries. Clara followed, her heels clicking like gunfire. The other guests drifted away, whispering about the scandal. Miss Marple stayed, her knitting back in her hands. She watched Lucy return, her face pale. The girls started clearing teacups, her hands trembling. Miss Marple stood and walked over, her smile kind. "Lucy, dear," she said gently, "are you all right?" Lucy jumped, nearly dropping a cup. "Oh, Miss Marple, I don't know what to say. I never expected this." Her voice was small, like a child's. "Mr. Harrington was kind to me, but everything? It's too much." Miss Marple patted her arm. "Don't worry, dear. Things will sort themselves out." But her eyes were sharp, noting Lucy's fear. The girl wasn't greedy. She was terrified. Why? As Miss Marple walked home with Dolly, the village was alive with chatter. Neighbors stood in doorways, talking about the will. "A maid getting millions?" one said. "It's not right," another grumbled. Miss Marple listened, storing every word. Gossip was like knitting. Each stitch added to the pattern. At home, she settled by her fire, her knitting needles clicking again. She thought about the will. The signature, Mr. Gray had said, was Mr. Harrington's, but Harold and Clara called it a fake. Forgery was a serious crime, and Miss Marple knew it often hid darker secrets. Had someone tricked Mr. Harrington, or was something worse at play? She remembered a story from years ago in St. Mary Mead. A man had forged a will to steal an inheritance, but the truth came out when his pen ran out of ink mid-signature. Miss Marple smiled. People thought they were clever, but they always left clues. A shaky hand, A wrong word, a nervous glance, she'd find them. Dolly burst in, her coat flapping. "Jane, you won't believe it," she said. "I just heard from Mrs. Price at the post office. She saw Mr. Gray burning papers in his garden last night. Papers, Jane! What if they were about the will?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Now, Dolly, don't jump to conclusions, but that's interesting." She didn't say more, but her mind was racing. Mr. Gray, nervous at the reading, burning papers. It was a thread to pull. As Dolly chattered, she thought about the suspects. Harold, greedy and loud, needed money. His business was failing, she'd heard. Clara, bitter and sly, wanted the house to spite her ex-husband. Lucy, sweet but scared, might know more, she said. And Mr. Gray, the lawyer, was hiding something. His shaky hands told her that. The village clock struck 7, its chime floating through the window. Miss Marple set her knitting down. This mystery was like her wool, tangled now, but she'd unravel it. She always did. Tomorrow. Chapter 2. Whispers of Forgery. The morning sun peeked through the lace curtains of Miss Marple's cottage, casting soft patterns on her polished table. She sat with a cup of tea, her knitting needles resting quietly. Her mind, though, was far from quiet. The will reading at Sherrington Hall had stirred St. Mary Mead into a frenzy, and Miss Marple knew the village's gossip would soon reveal more than any lawyer's papers. Yesterday's scene replayed in her head. Harold's red face, Clara's sharp eyes, Lucy's trembling hands, and Mr. Gray's nervous fidgeting. A will, leaving everything to a maid? It was bold, strange, and, Miss Marple suspected, not quite right. Forgery, Harold had shouted. Clara had agreed. But why? And who stood to gain? Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes narrowing. She'd seen greed twist people before, and this felt like more than a family squabble. The village was already buzzing. By breakfast, whispers of the will had spread like wildfire. At the bakery, Mrs. Price, the postmistress, told anyone who'd listened that Lucy Trent was now richer than the Queen. At the butcher's, Mr. Stokes grumbled that no maid deserved a mansion. Miss Marple heard it all when she stepped out for her morning walk, her gray shawl snug against the chilly air. She nodded politely, storing every word. Gossip wasn't just chatter, it was clues. Her first stop was the village shop, where Mrs. Green, the shopkeeper, was stacking jars of jam. "Good morning, Miss Marple," Mrs. Green said, her eyes bright with news. "Have you heard? They're saying Mr. Harrington's will is a fake. Harold was here buying cigarettes, and he was furious, said he'd prove it's not his uncle's signature." Miss Marple tilted her head. "Did he now?" she said softly. "And what else did Harold say?" Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp, like a cat watching a mouse. Mrs. Green leaned closer, her voice dropping. "He's saying he's hiring a handwriting expert from London. Says the signature's all wrong, too shaky, not like Mr. Harrington's bold writing, and Clara was with him, muttering about lawyers cheating her out of her share." Miss Marple nodded, her mind clicking like her knitting needles. A handwriting expert? That was interesting. If Harold was so sure, he must know something, or want others to think he did. And Clara, always bitter, had her own reasons to stir trouble. Miss Marple thanked Mrs. Green and bought a tin of biscuits, her thoughts already elsewhere. As she walked toward the church, she spotted Lucy Trent hurrying down the lane, her head down. The girl looked pale, her eyes red from crying. Miss Marple slowed her steps, pretending to admire a rose bush. "Good morning, Lucy," she called, her voice warm. "Are you well, dear?" Lucy stopped, startled, clutching her basket. "Oh, Miss Marple, I'm fine, I suppose. It's just all this talk. People stare at me now.
They think I stole the money." Miss Marple's heart softened, but her mind stayed sharp. "Nonsense, dear," she said, patting Lucy's arm. "People talk when they're jealous. Tell me, did Mr. Harrington ever mention changing his will?" Lucy shook her head quickly. "No, never. He was kind, gave me extra wages sometimes, but all his money? I didn't ask for it." Her voice broke, and she looked ready to run. Miss Marple smiled kindly. "Of course you didn't. Now don't let the gossip bother you. Go on with your day." Lucy nodded and hurried off, but Miss Marple watched her go. The girl was scared, not greedy. Why? Was she hiding something, or was someone threatening her? Back at her cottage, Miss Marple found Dolly Bantry waiting, her hat slightly crooked from rushing over. "Jane, you'll never guess," Dolly said, plopping into a chair. "I saw Mr. Gray at the train station this morning, looking like a ghost. He was carrying a big envelope, and when I said hello, he nearly jumped out of his skin." Miss Marple's eyebrows rose. "An envelope, you say? Did you see what was on it?" Dolly shook her head. "No, but it looked important, sealed with red wax like the will, and he was muttering about fixing mistakes. Jane, do you think he's up to something?" Miss Marple didn't answer right away. She poured Dolly a cup of tea, her mind turning. Mr. Gray, burning papers last night, now nervous with a sealed envelope. It was another thread to pull. "Dolly," she said at last, "people make mistakes when they're scared. Let's see what Mr. Gray does next." That afternoon, Miss Marple visited the vicarage, where the vicar's wife, Mrs. Clement, was hosting a tea. The room was full of village ladies, all talking about the will. Mrs. Price was there, repeating Harold's claims about the signature. "It's not Mr. Harrington's writing," she said firmly. "I saw his letters at the post office. Big, bold strokes. This will's signature's all wobbly." Miss Marple sipped her tea, listening. She remembered Mr. Harrington's letters too, strong, confident writing. A shaky signature could mean forgery or something else. Old age? Illness? She filed that thought away. Mrs. Clement leaned over. "Jane, what do you make of it? Is the will fake, or is Harold just angry?" Miss Marple smiled faintly. "People see what they want to see, Mrs. Clement, but I'd like to see that will myself." She didn't say more, but her mind was busy. A forged signature needed a forger, someone with access to Mr. Harrington's papers. Harold? Clara? Mr. Gray? Or even Lucy, though that seemed unlikely. As the tea ended, Miss Marple walked home, passing Harrington Hall. The big house looked quiet, but she noticed a curtain twitch in an upstairs window. Someone was watching. She kept walking, her steps slow, but her eyes alert. At home, she pulled out her notebook, a small thing she kept for mysteries. She wrote, "Signature shaky, Harold claims forgery, Clara agrees, Mr. Gray nervous, burning papers, envelope, Lucy scared. Why?" She tapped her pencil, thinking. Forgery was tricky. It needed skill, nerve, and a reason. Harold had debts. She'd heard he owed money in London. Clara wanted the house, maybe for pride or revenge. Mr. Gray handled the will, so he had the best chance to fake it. And Lucy, she didn't seem greedy, but scared people hid secrets. That evening, Miss Marple sat by her fire, knitting again. She thought of a story from years ago, in St. Mary Mead. A woman had forged a letter to get her sister's money, but her mistake was using the wrong pen. The ink didn't match. Miss Marple smiled. Forgeries always left clues. A smudge, a hesitation, a wrong word. She'd find this one too. A knock at the door startled her. It was Mrs. Green from the shop, her face pale. "Miss Marple, I had to tell you," she whispered. "I found something odd in the shop's waste bin. A torn letter with Mr. Harrington's name on it. It looked like his writing, but it mentioned changing the will, and it was dated 2 days before he died." Miss Marple's eyes lit up. "May I see it, Mrs. Green?" she said calmly, But her mind was racing. 2 days before his death, Mr. Harrington wanted to change his will? And Lucy's name was there? Was this proof the will was real or part of a clever trick? She tucked the paper into her notebook. Tomorrow she'd ask more questions. Lucy, Mr. Gray, maybe even Harold. Someone knew more than they were saying. The village clock chimed 9. It sounds soft in the night. Miss Marple set her knitting down. The mystery was growing, like a tangle of wool. A shaky signature, a torn letter, a nervous lawyer, a scared maid. The pieces were there, waiting for her to knit them together. She smiled. St. Mary Mead was never dull.
Chapter 3. The Village Gossip Begins. The morning mist hung low over St. Mary Mead, wrapping the village in a soft gray blanket. Miss Jane Marple stood at her garden gate, her shawl tight against the chill. Her eyes, bright and sharp, scanned the quiet lanes. The village was awake, and so was the gossip about Mr. Harrington's will. Every whisper was a clue, and Miss Marple knew how to listen. She thought about yesterday's discoveries, the torn letter mentioning Lucy, Mr. Gray's nervous behavior, and Harold's loud claims of forgery. The will, leaving everything to Lucy the maid, had set tongues wagging. Was it real? Was it fake? And why was Lucy so scared? Miss Marple's knitting needles were still, but her mind clicked like a clock, piecing together the puzzle. She set off toward the village square, her steps slow but purposeful. The bakery was her first stop, where Mrs. Price, the postmistress, was already chatting with customers. "It's a scandal," Mrs. Price said, her hands waving. "Lucy Trent, a maid, getting Harrington Hall? I say the will's a fake. Harold's right. Mr. Harrington's signature was never shaky." Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. "People do get upset over money," she said softly. "Did you notice anything odd about Mr. Harrington's letters lately, Mrs. Price?" Her voice was gentle, but her eyes watched closely. Mrs. Price leaned over the counter, her voice low. "Well, now you mention it, his last few letters were different. The writing was weaker, like his hand wasn't steady. I thought he was just old, but maybe—" She trailed off, her eyes wide. Miss Marple smiled. "Thank you, dear. That's helpful." She bought a loaf of bread and left, her mind buzzing. Weaker writing could mean illness, not forgery, or someone copying his style badly. She needed to see that will. Her next stop was Dolly Bantry's house. Dolly was in her garden, clipping roses, her face lit with excitement. "Jane, you're just in time," she called, waving her shears. "I heard something juicy. Clara was at the pub last night, telling everyone Mr. Harrington promised her the house years ago. She says Lucy tricked him into changing the will." Miss Marple raised her eyebrow. "Tricked him? That's a strong word." She sat on a garden bench, her hands folded. "What else did Clara say?" Dolly plopped beside her, petals stuck in her hair. "She was angry, Jane. She said Lucy was always hovering around Mr. Harrington, bringing him tea, reading to him. Clara thinks Lucy wormed her way into his heart to steal the money." Miss Marple's lips twitched. "Clara sees what she wants to see," she said. "But Lucy doesn't strike me as cunning. Scared, yes. Greedy, no." She remembered Lucy's pale face, her trembling hands. The girl was hiding something, but was it guilt or fear? Dolly leaned closer. "There's more. Mr. Stokes, the butcher, said he saw Mr. Gray arguing with Harold outside the pub. Harold was shouting about proof of forgery, and Mr. Gray looked ready to run." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Arguing, you say? That's worth noting." She stood,
brushing her shawl. "I think I'll visit Lucy today. A chat might clear things up." She found Lucy at Harrington Hall, scrubbing the front steps. The big house loomed behind her, its windows dark. Lucy looked up, her face tired and pale. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice small, "what are you doing here?" "Just a neighborly visit," Miss Marple said, smiling. "May I sit, dear?" She settled on a bench nearby, her eyes kind but sharp. "The village is full of talk about the will. It must be hard for you." Lucy's hands froze on the scrub brush. "It's awful," she whispered. "Everyone thinks I stole it. I didn't ask for anything. Mr. Harrington was kind, but I never thought—" Her voice broke, and she looked away. Miss Marple patted her hand. "I believe you, dear. But tell me, did Mr. Harrington act strange before he died? Was he sick or worried?" Lucy hesitated, her eyes darting to the house. "He was tired," she said slowly. "His hands shook sometimes, and he wrote less. But he was happy, I think. He said he wanted to make things right before he went." Miss Marple's heart quickened. Make things right? Did he say how? Lucy shook her head. "No, but he wrote a letter a few days before it happened. He asked me to post it, but I forgot. It's still in my room." Her face flushed, and she looked guilty. Miss Marple kept her voice soft. "That's all right, dear. Could I see it? It might help." Lucy nodded and ran inside, returning with a sealed envelope. It was addressed to Mr. Gray in Mr. Harrington's bold handwriting, but the strokes were uneven, shaky. Miss Marple tucked it in her bag. "Thank you, Lucy. You've been very brave." As she walked away, Miss Marple's mind raced. A letter to Mr. Gray, written days before the death? It could be nothing, or everything. She needed to open it, but carefully. For now, she'd keep it safe. Back in the village, she passed the church, where the vicar, Mr. Clement, was sweeping the path. He waved her over. "Miss Marple, have you heard the latest? Someone left a note in the church collection box last night. It said, 'The will is a lie. Check the signature. No name, just that.'" Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. An anonymous note. How curious. She thanked him and moved on, her thoughts spinning. The note was a bold move. Someone wanted the forgery talk to grow. But who? Harold, to push his case? Clara, to stir trouble? Or someone else? At home, she sat by her fire, pulling out her notebook. She added shaky handwriting in last letters, Lucy's letter to Mr. Gray, anonymous note in church, Harold and Mr. Gray arguing. She opened Lucy's letter carefully, using a pear hen to lift the seal. Inside was a single page, in Mr. Harrington writing, "Percival, the will must stand. I trust you to protect it. Lucy deserves her chance." The signature was shaky, but it looked real. Miss Marple leaned back, her knitting forgotten. The mystery was thickening, like a good stew. A shaky signature, a hidden letter, an anonymous note, a typewriter ribbon. The pieces were scattered, but she'd find the pattern. She always did. Tomorrow she'd visit Mr. Gray. A polite chat might loosen his tongue, and she'd watch Clara. Her bitterness was a clue in itself. Miss Marple smiled. St. Mary Mead was full of secrets, but none could hide from her for long.
Chapter 4. Shadows of Motive. The morning sun broke through the clouds over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the village. Miss Jane Marple sat at her breakfast table, her tea steaming gently. Her knitting lay untouched, her mind too busy with the puzzle of Mr. Harrington's will. The torn letter, the anonymous note, and Clara's typewriter ribbon swirled in her thoughts. Each clue was a thread, and she was determined to weave them together.
The village was restless. Gossip about the will had grown louder, with everyone picking sides. Some believed Lucy deserved the fortune. Others called it a scam. Miss Marple knew better than to trust opinions. She trusted facts, and the facts pointed to motives: greed, revenge, or secrets buried deep. Today she'd dig deeper. She slipped on her shawl and headed to the village post office. Mrs. Price, always eager for news, was sorting letters. "Miss Marple, you're early," she said, her eyes bright. "Everyone's talking about that note in the church. They say it proves the will's a fake." Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. "People love a story, Mrs. Price. Have you seen Mr. Gray lately? He seems busy." Mrs. Price leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "Oh, yes. He was here yesterday, posting a package to London. Looked nervous, kept checking over his shoulder, and he asked if anyone had sent letters in Mr. Harrington's name recently." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "Did they?" "Not that I know, but I found an old letter from Mr. Harrington in the back, dated a month ago. The writing was strong, not shaky at all." She handed Miss Marple a crumpled envelope addressed to a bank. Miss Marple thanked her and tucked it away. Strong writing a month ago, but shaky in the will and Lucy's letter. It was a puzzle. Illness could weaken a hand, but so could a forger's mistake. She needed to see Mr. Gray. She found him at his office, a small building near the village square. The sign read, "Percival Gray, Solicitor," but the door was half open, as if he'd rushed in. Miss Marple knocked lightly and stepped inside. Mr. Gray looked up from his desk, his face pale, papers scattered around him. "Miss Marple," he said, startled, "what brings you here?" "Just a friendly visit," she said, smiling. She sat, her hands folded. "The village is full of talk about the will. It must be hard managing such a surprising document." Mr. Gray's fingers twitched, and he pushed his glasses up. "It's my job," he said, his voice tight. "The will is legal, signed by Mr. Harrington. I don't know why everyone's upset." Miss Marple tilted her head. "Harold and Clara think it's a forge. They say the signature's wrong. You knew Mr. Harrington well, didn't you? Did his writing change before he died?" Mr. Gray hesitated, his eyes darting to a locked drawer. "He was old," he said quickly. "His hands shook sometimes. It's normal." But his voice wobbled, and Miss Marple noticed a pen on his desk, its nib stained with blue ink. She smiled sweetly. "Of course. Thank you, Mr. Gray." She left, her mind racing. That locked drawer, did it hold the real will? And the blue ink, did it match the will's signature? She'd check later. Back in the village, she passed the pub where Harold stood outside, talking loudly to a group of men. "I'm telling you it's a fake," he shouted, his face red. "I've got a handwriting man coming tomorrow. He'll prove it." Miss Marple slowed her steps, listening. Harold's anger felt real, but was it all show? Greed could make a man loud. She headed to Dolly Bantry's for tea. Dolly was in her parlor, her eyes sparkling with gossip. "Jane, you missed the drama," she said, pouring tea. "Clara was here earlier, saying she's hired a lawyer to fight the will. She says Mr. Harrington was sick, maybe not thinking straight when he signed it." Miss Marple sipped her tea. "Sick or pressured?" she asked softly. "Clara seems very sure of herself." Dolly nodded. "She's furious. Said Mr. Harrington owed her after their divorce. And she mentioned something odd. She saw Lucy burning papers in the garden at Harrington Hall last week." Miss Marple's cup paused midair. Lucy burning papers? That's unexpected. Her mind spun. Lucy, scared and quiet, destroying evidence?
Or was Clara lying to point fingers? She needed to talk to Lucy again. She found the maid at the market, buying apples. Lucy's face was pale, her eyes red. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice shaky, "I can't stand all this talk. People think I'm a thief." Miss Marple smiled kindly. "Don't mind them, dear, but tell me, did you burn papers at Harrington Hall recently?" Lucy's eyes widened, and she dropped an apple. I just burned old bills," she stammered. "Mr. Harrington asked me to clean out his desk before he died. I didn't read them." "I'm sure you didn't," she said. "But did you notice anything strange in those papers? Anything about the will?" Lucy shook her head, but her hands trembled. "No, just bills and letters, I swear." She looked ready to cry, and Miss Marple let her go. The girl was hiding something, but fear, not guilt, seemed to drive her. Back at home, Miss Marple pulled out her notebook. She added, "Strong writing a month ago, shaky in will." Mr. Gray's locked drawer, blue ink pen, Harold's handwriting expert, Clara's lawyer, her claim of Lucy burning papers, Lucy's fear. The clues were piling up, but the picture wasn't clear yet. She opened the old letter from Mrs. Price. The writing was bold, confident, unlike the will's shaky scrawl. She compared it to Lucy's letter to Mr. Gray. The signatures looked similar, but the will's was weaker, as if drawn with effort. Miss Marple frowned. A forger might copy a signature, but miss the strength of the hand. Or was Mr. Harrington sick, as Clara claimed? A memory flashed, a case years ago in St. Mary Mead, where a woman forged a check by practicing the signature for weeks. She got the shape right, but used the wrong ink. Miss Marple smiled. Ink was a clue here, too. She'd ask to see the will tomorrow, maybe at the vicarage, where Mr. Gray sometimes worked. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. It was Mrs. Clement, the vicar's wife, her face worried. "Miss Marple," she said, holding out a small key, "I found something in the church. It was under a pew, near where the anonymous note was left. Do you think it's important?" Miss Marple took the key, her heart quickening. It was small, like one for a drawer or a box. "Very important, Mrs. Clement. Thank you." She tucked it into her pocket. Could it fit Mr. Gray's locked drawer, or something at Harrington Hall? As Mrs. Clement left, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting needles clicking softly. The mystery was growing darker. Motives swirled like shadows. Harold's greed, Clara's revenge, Lucy's fear, Mr. Gray's secrets. The key, the ink, the burned papers, they were pieces of a puzzle. She thought of Harold's debts, Clara's bitterness, Lucy's trembling hands, and Mr. Gray's nervous glances. Someone was lying, and someone knew the truth. The village clock chimed 7, its sound echoing in the quiet night. Miss Marple set her knitting down. Tomorrow she'd visit Harrington Hall again. She'd ask Lucy about those burned papers and see if the key fit anything. And she'd watch Mr. Gray closely. His nerves were a clue in themselves. She smiled, her eyes bright. The will was a tangle of lies, but Miss Marple loved untangling. In St. Mary Mead, secrets never stayed hidden.
Chapter 5. The Midnight Intrusion. The moon hung low over St. Mary Mead, casting a pale glow on the village's quiet lanes. Miss Jane Marple sat by her fireplace, her knitting needles still, her mind racing. The mystery of Mr. Harrington's will grew darker with each day. The shaky signature, Lucy's fear, Mr. Gray's nervous habits, Clara's typewriter ribbon, and the small key from the church, all were pieces of a puzzle. Tonight, she felt, something would shift. The village was restless.
Gossip about the will had turned into wild stories. Some said Lucy had tricked Mr. Harrington. Others swore the will was forged by a stranger. Miss Marple ignored the rumors, focusing on facts. The key in her pocket felt heavy, like a promise of answers. Was it for Mr. Gray's locked drawer, or something at Harrington Hall? She'd find out soon. Her morning began with a visit to the vicarage, where Mrs. Clement was arranging flowers. "Miss Marple, any news about that key?" Mrs. Clement asked, her voice low. "The village is buzzing about the will. People say Harold's expert arrives today." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Let them talk, dear. Gossip hides truth as much as it reveals it. Have you seen Lucy lately? She seemed troubled yesterday." Mrs. Clement nodded. "She was at church this morning looking pale. Said she's scared to stay at Harrington Hall. Thinks someone is watching her." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "Watching her? That's worth noting." She thanked Mrs. Clement and headed toward Harrington Hall, her steps slow but sure. Lucy's fear was a clue, and fear often meant danger. At the hall, the big house stood silent, its ivy-covered walls looming in the daylight. Miss Marple knocked, and Lucy opened the door, her face pale as milk. "Miss Marple," she gasped, "I wasn't expecting you." "Just checking on you, dear," Miss Marple said, her voice kind. "May I come in?" She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the grand hall. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, but the air felt heavy, like secrets hung in it. Lucy twisted her hands. "It's been awful," she said. "Last night I heard noises, footsteps in the garden. I'm scared to sleep here." Miss Marple patted her arm. "Noises? Tell me more." Lucy hesitated. "It was past midnight. I looked out my window and saw a shadow moving near the study. I thought maybe it was a thief." Her voice trembled, and she looked ready to cry. Miss Marple's mind raced. A shadow at midnight? The study was where Mr. Harrington kept his papers. "Did you see who it was?" she asked gently. Lucy shook her head. "It was too dark, but this morning I found the study window open and papers were scattered on the desk." Miss Marple's heart quickened. "Show me, dear." They walked to the study, a large room with bookshelves and a heavy oak desk. The window was slightly ajar, and papers lay in a messy pile. Miss Marple's eyes darted to the desk. A drawer was half open, its lock scratched as if someone had tried to force it. "Look at this," Miss Marple said, pointing to the scratches. "Someone was here searching for something." She tried the key from the church in the drawer's lock. It fit perfectly and clicked open. Inside was a single sheet, a draft of the will dated a week before Mr. Harrington's death. The signature was shaky, like the final will, but the ink was black, not blue. Lucy gasped. "That's Mr. Harrington's writing, but why was it hidden?" Miss Marple tucked the paper into her bag. "We'll find out, dear. For now, keep this quiet." She smiled, but her mind was buzzing. A break-in, a hidden draft, black ink instead of blue. The clues were piling up, but the picture was still blurry. Back in the village, Miss Marple passed the pub, where Harold was shouting again. "My expert's here," he bellowed to a small crowd. "He'll prove that signature's a fake." A man in a gray suit was standing beside him, holding a briefcase. Miss Marple slowed, listening. Harold's confidence was loud, but his eyes were nervous. Was he hiding something? She headed to Dolly Bantry's, where tea was brewing. Dolly was bursting with news. "Jane, you won't believe it. Mr. Stokes saw Clara sneaking around Harrington Hall last night, near the garden. She had a flashlight." Miss Marple's eyebrows rose. Clara? At night? She sipped her tea, thinking. Clara, with her typewriter ribbon and bitter heart, at the hall during a break-in? It was too neat to be chance. Dolly leaned closer. "And there's more. Mrs. Green said Mr. Gray was in the shop this morning buying matches." "Matches, Jane, after burning papers last week?" Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Matches and break-ins. The village is busy." She didn't say more,
but her mind spun. Clara in the garden, Mr. Gray with matches, a scratched lock, and a hidden draft. The motives were clearer now. Harold's greed, Clara's revenge, Mr. Gray's secrets, Lucy's fear. The break-in was a bold move. Someone wanted that draft, or something else in the study. The village clock chimed 10, its sound soft in the night. Miss Marple picked up her knitting, her needles clicking like a countdown. The mystery was a tangle, but she was close to a thread that would unravel it. Tomorrow, she'd confront Mr. Gray about the burned paper and ask Lucy about the study. And she'd watch Clara. Her flashlight was no accident. She smiled, her eyes bright. St. Mary Mead was full of shadows, but Miss Marple knew how to shine a light. The truth was close, waiting for her to find it.
Chapter 6. Unraveling Lies. The morning mist clung to St. Mary Mead, veiling the village in a soft gray hush. Miss Jane Marple sat at her kitchen table, her tea cooling as her mind worked. The midnight break-in at Harrington Hall had stirred the pot, and clues were bubbling up. The scratched drawer, the draft will with black ink, Clara's gray cloth in the garden, and Mr. Gray's burned paper. The will mystery was a tangle, but Miss Marple knew every knot had a loose end. Today, she'd pull one. The village was alive with whispers. Harold's handwriting expert was poking around. Clara was threatening lawsuits, and Lucy was hiding at Harrington Hall, scared of shadows. Miss Marple's notebook bulged with notes, shaky signatures, a hidden key, a flashlight in the night. Each clue pointed to motives: greed, revenge, or fear. She needed to talk to the suspects, starting with the one who seemed most nervous, Mr. Gray. She slipped on her shawl and headed to the village square, her steps slow but steady. The air smelled of damp leaves and fresh bread from the bakery. At Mr. Gray's office, the door was locked, but a light flickered inside. Miss Marple knocked sharply. "Mr. Gray, it's Jane Marple. May we talk?" The door creaked open, and Mr. Gray's pale face appeared, his glasses crooked. "Miss Marple, I'm busy," he said, his voice thin. His hands fidgeted, and a blue-inked pen peeked from his pocket. Miss Marple smiled, her eyes sharp. "Just a moment, dear. I found something odd. A burned paper with Mr. Harrington's name. From your office, I hear." She watched his face closely. Mr. Gray's eyes widened, and he stepped back. "Burned paper? I don't know anything about that. Just old bills, probably." His voice shook, and he glanced at the locked drawer Miss Marple had noticed before. She tilted her head. "Bills don't usually have names, Mr. Gray. And that drawer, does it hold anything important? Say, about the will?" He froze, then forced a laugh. "Nothing but files, Miss Marple. You're imagining things." But his hands trembled, and he shut the door quickly. Miss Marple walked away, her mind buzzing. Mr. Gray was hiding something, maybe the real will, or proof of forgery. That blue ink in his pen matched the will signature, not the black ink of the draft. She'd keep an eye on him. Next, she headed to the village shop where Mrs. Green was sweeping the floor. "Miss Marple, you're out early," Mrs. Green said, her eyes bright with gossip. "Have you heard? Harold's handwriting expert says the will signature is fake, too shaky, not Mr. Harrington's style." Miss Marple nodded. "Experts can be helpful, but they don't always see the whole picture. Tell me, Mrs. Green, do you know anything about Clara's past? She's been active lately." Mrs. Green leaned closer, her voice low. "Oh, yes, Clara used to work as a typist in London years ago. She was fired for forging a client's signature on some papers. Got away with it, but people talked. She's clever with pens and paper." Miss Marple's heart quickened. "Forging, you say? That's interesting." Clara's typewriter ribbon, her flashlight in the garden, and now a history of forgery. The pieces were aligning. She thanked Mrs. Green and bought a bar of soap, her thoughts racing.
At noon she visited Dolly Bantry, who was in her parlor surrounded by teacups. "Jane, the village is a circus," Dolly said, her cheeks pink. "Lucy came by, nearly in tears. She says someone left a note under her door last night. It said, 'Give up the money or else.'" Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. A threat. Did she keep the note? Dolly nodded. "She showed me. It's typed, not handwritten. Lucy's scared to death, Jane. She wants to leave St. Mary Mead." Miss Marple sipped her tea, thinking. A typed threat. Clara's typewriter ribbon came to mind. "I'll talk to Lucy. She needs a friend." She found Lucy at Harrington Hall, dusting the grand staircase. The girl looked like a ghost, her eyes red and her hands shaky. "Miss Marple," she whispered, "I can't stay here. Someone wants me gone." Miss Marple sat on a step, her voice gentle. "Show me the note, dear." Lucy pulled a crumpled paper from her apron. It read, "Give up the money, or you'll regret it." No signature, just cold words. Miss Marple studied it, her mind sharp. The type was clean, professional, like a typewriter's work. "Did you, Lucy, Mr. Harrington ever use a typewriter?" she asked. Lucy shook her head. "No, he always wrote by hand. Hated machines." Her voice trembled, and she looked at the floor. Miss Marple patted her hand. "You're doing fine, dear. Now, those papers you burned, were any typed?" Lucy's eyes widened. "No, they were all handwritten. Old bills, letters, nothing important." But her voice wavered, and Miss Marple saw fear, not lies. She left Lucy with a kind smile, but her thoughts were racing. A typed threat. Clara's past as a forger. The gray cloth in the garden. Clara was climbing higher on her suspect list. But Mr. Gray's nerves and Harold's loud claims couldn't be ignored. Back in the village, she passed the pub, where Harold's handwriting expert was talking to a small crowd. "The signature is a fake," the man said, holding up a magnifying glass. "Too shaky, too uneven. Mr. Harrington was strong till the end." Harold stood beside him, smirking, but his eyes darted nervously. Miss Marple lingered, listening. The expert's confidence was loud, but experts could be bought. She remembered a case in St. Mary Mead years ago where a man paid a witness to lie about a signature. The truth came out when the witness's ink-stained fingers gave him away. She'd check the expert's credentials later. At home, she pulled out her notebook, adding, "Clara's forging past, typed threat to Lucy, Mr. Gray's blue ink locked drawer, expert claims fake signature, Lucy's burned papers handwritten." The clues were mounting, but the motive was key. Clara's revenge seemed likely. She wanted the house, hated Lucy's gain. But Mr. Gray's secrets and Harold's debts were just as strong. She opened the draft will from the study drawer, comparing it to the letter from Lucy. Both had black ink, shaky signatures, and Mr. Harrington's style. The burned scrap from Mr. Gray's bin was different, bold writing like his older letters. Was Mr. Gray destroying evidence, or was someone planting it? A knock broke her thoughts. It was Mrs. Price, the postmistress, her face flushed. "Miss Marple, I found something odd," she said, holding out a torn envelope. "It was in the postbox, addressed to Mr. Gray, but never sent. It's in Mr. Harrington's writing, dated 2 days before he died." Miss Marple took the envelope, her heart racing. Inside was a note. "Percival, protect Lucy. The will is my choice. Don't let them change it." The signature was shaky, black ink again. She thanked Mrs. Price, her mind spinning. Another note, protecting Lucy. Mr. Harrington knew trouble was coming. She sat by her fire, her knitting untouched. Clara's forging past fit the typed threat and the gray cloth. Mr. Gray's burned paper and blue ink pointed to him hiding something. Harold's expert might be a trick to shift blame. And Lucy? Her fear was real, but was she hiding a secret? The village clock chimed 8. Its sound soft in the evening. Miss Marple picked up her knitting, her needles clicking, like a puzzle falling into place.
The mystery was a web, but she was close to the center. Tomorrow she'd visit Clara. Her typewriter needed a look, and she'd check Mr. Gray's drawer with that key, if she could. She smiled, her eyes bright. Lies were unraveling in St. Mary Mead, and Miss Marple was ready to pull the final thread.
Chapter 7. The Forged Signature Exposed. The morning sun filtered through the mist in St. Mary Mead, casting a soft glow on the village's quiet lanes. Miss Jane Marple sat at her breakfast table, her tea untouched, her mind racing. The mystery of Mr. Harrington's will was close to unraveling. Clues crowded her notebook: the shaky signature, Clara's forging past, Mr. Gray's burned papers, the typed threat to Lucy, and the small key that opened the study drawer. Today she'd pull the threads together. The village buzzed with tension. Harold's handwriting expert had declared the will a fake. Clara was rallying support for her lawsuit, and Lucy hid at Harrington Hall, scared of every shadow. Miss Marple knew the truth lay in the motives: greed, revenge, or fear. She'd start with Clara, whose typewriter and sneaky nighttime visits pointed to guilt. She slipped on her shawl and headed to Clara's cottage, a neat house with roses by the gate. Clara answered the door, her face tight, her eyes cold. "Miss Marple, what do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Just a neighbourly chat," Miss Marple said, smiling. "May I see your typewriter, dear? I'm thinking of getting one." Clara hesitated, then led her inside. The typewriter sat on a desk, its ribbon fresh and black. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to a waste bin nearby, where a crumpled paper caught her attention. It looked like a practice sheet, with typed words, "Give up the money." Her heart quickened. This matched Lucy's threat note. "Lovely machine," Miss Marple said, her voice light. "Do you type letters often?" Clara's lips thinned. "Sometimes. Why do you care?" She crossed her arms, her eyes darting to the waste bin. Miss Marple smiled and left, her mind buzzing. The typed sheet was no coincidence. Clara's past as a forger, her flashlight in the garden, and now this. She was weaving a web of lies. Next, Miss Marple visited Mr. Gray's office. The door was open, and he was sorting papers, his hand shaky. "Miss Marple again," he said, his voice high. "I'm very busy." "I won't take long," she said, slipping the small key from her pocket. "I found this in the church. Does it fit your drawer?" She watched his face closely. Mr. Gray paled, his glasses slipping. I don't know," he stammered. Before he could stop her, Miss Marple stepped to the locked drawer and tried the key. It clicked open. Inside was a bundle of papers, including a will draft with a bold, strong signature, Mr. Harrington's, in black ink, dated a month before his death. It left everything to Harold. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "This is interesting, Mr. Gray. Why hide this?" He slumped in his chair, his face grey. "It's, an old draft. Mr. Harrington changed his mind. The new will is real, I swear." Miss Marple nodded, tucking the draft into her bag. "We'll see, dear." She left, her thoughts racing. An old will for Harold, hidden away. Mr. Gray was scared, but was he a forger or a pawn? Back in the village, she passed the pub, where Harold was boasting to a crowd. "I got my expert, and he proved it," he shouted. "The will's a fake, and I'll get what's mine." His eyes were bright, but Miss Marple saw fear behind his bravado.
Was he pushing the forgery story to hide his own scheme? She headed to Dolly Bantry's, where tea was brewing. Dolly was bursting with news. "Jane, Lucy called me terrified. She found another note at the hall taped to the study door. It said, 'Leave or pay,' typed like the last one." Miss Marple's lips tightened. Another threat. "I need to see Lucy." She hurried to Harrington Hall, where Lucy was sweeping the porch, her face pale as chalk. "Miss Marple," she whispered, "I can't take it any more." She handed her the new note, typed in black ink, "Leave St. Mary Mead or pay the price." Miss Marple studied it, her mind sharp. The type matched Clara's machine perfectly. "Lucy, dear, did Mr. Harrington ever seem pressured before he died? Anyone pushing him to change his will?" Lucy shook her head, tears brimming. "No, but he was sick. His hands shook a lot. He said he wanted to fix mistakes before it was too late. That's all I know." Miss Marple patted her arm. "You're brave, dear. Stay strong." She left, her thoughts spinning. Mr. Harrington's illness explained the shaky signature, but not the hidden draft or Clara's threats. Someone was desperate to scare Lucy away. At home, Miss Marple spread her clues on the table. The draft will for Harold, the typed threats, the garden cloth, the burned paper, and the church key. She compared the signatures. The final will signature was shaky, in blue ink, like Mr. Gray's pen. The draft for Harold was bold in black ink, like Mr. Harrington's older letters. The letter to Mr. Gray asking to protect Lucy was shaky but in black ink. The ink was the key. She recalled a case in St. Mary Mead years ago where a forger used the wrong ink to fake a letter. The mistake was a smudge, visible under light. She held the final will, borrowed from the vicarage where Mr. Gray had left it, to the lamp. The blue ink shimmered, unlike the black ink of the draft. A forger's error? A knock broke her thoughts. It was Mrs. Green, the shopkeeper, her face flushed. "Miss Marple, I overheard Clara at the shop talking to a man on the phone. She said, 'The plan's working. She'll run soon.' Sounded like she meant Lucy." Miss Marple's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Mrs. Green. That's very helpful." She closed the door, her mind racing. Clara's plan to scare Lucy was clear, but was she the forger, or was she working with someone? She visited the church where Mr. Clement was tidying the hymnals. "Miss Marple, any progress?" he asked. "The village is in a state. Harold's expert is stirring things up." Miss Marple nodded. "Experts can be wrong, Mr. Clement. Have you seen any strangers near the hall lately?" He frowned. "Now you mention it, the groundskeeper saw a man in a grey suit near the study window 2 nights ago. Thought it was Harold's expert snooping." Miss Marple's heart quickened. The break-in, the grey suit, Harold's expert, or someone else. She thanked him and headed home, her notebook filling up. Clara's typed threats, phone call, old will for Harold, bold signature, blue ink in final will, grey suit at hall. She sat by her fire, piecing it together. Clara's forging past and typed notes pointed to her scaring Lucy, maybe to force her to give up the inheritance. Mr. Gray's hidden draft and blue ink suggested he'd tampered with the will. Harold's expert might be a hired liar covering his own tracks. But the motive was greed and revenge mixed like poison. Clara wanted the house, Harold wanted the money, and Mr. Gray wanted what? To hide a mistake? She examined the burned paper from Mr. Gray's bin. A faint word stood out. Lucy. Was he burning evidence to protect her or to frame her?
She thought of Lucy's fear, her claim of Mr. Harrington's illness. The shaky signature could be real, but the blue ink was wrong. A memory flashed, a St. Mary Mead case where a lawyer faked a will to please a client, but his nervous habits gave him away. Mr. Gray's shaky hands, his locked drawer, his matches, they screamed guilt. But Clara's typewriter and Harold's expert were just as loud. The village clock chimed 9, its sound drifting through the night. Miss Marple picked up her knitting, her needles clicking softly. The forged signature was exposed, not by the expert, but by the ink. Tomorrow she'd gather everyone at Harrington Hall. She'd lay out the clues, watch their faces, and let the truth slip out. She smiled, her eyes bright. The web of lies was fraying, and Miss Marple was ready to cut the final thread. St. Mary Mead's secrets were about to unravel.
Chapter 8. Justice in St. Mary Mead. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow over St. Mary Mead, softening the edges of Harrington Hall's stone walls. Inside, the drawing room was packed, the air thick with tension. Miss Jane Marple stood by the fireplace, her shawl neat, her eyes sharp as needles. She'd invited everyone, Lucy, Harold, Clara, Mr. Gray, and a few village busybodies like Dolly Bantry, to hear the truth about Mr. Harrington's will. The mystery was a tangled knot, but Miss Marple was ready to unravel it. The village had buzzed all morning. Harold's handwriting expert had stirred doubts. Clara's threats to Lucy had grown bolder, and Mr. Gray's nervous habits had everyone whispering. Miss Marple's notebook held the clues: the shaky signature, Clara's typewriter, Mr. Gray's blue ink, the hidden will draft, the church key, and the burned papers. Today, she'd lay them out and watch the guilty squirm. She cleared her throat, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you for coming," she said, her eyes scanning the room. Lucy sat by the window, pale and nervous, twisting her hands. Harold lounged in a chair, his face red with impatience. Clara stood stiffly, her eyes cold as ice. Mr. Gray fidgeted by the door, his glasses slipping. Dolly Bantry, perched on a sofa, looked ready to burst with excitement. "The will of Mr. Harrington has caused quite a stir," Miss Marple began. "Some say it's forged. Some say Lucy doesn't deserve it. But the truth lies in the clues, and I've found them." Harold snorted. "It's fake. My expert proved the signature's wrong, too shaky." Clara nodded sharply. "Reginald promised me the house. That maid tricked him." Lucy shrank in her seat, her eyes wet. Mr. Gray said nothing, but his hands shook, clutching a pen. Blue ink, Miss Marple noted. She smiled faintly. "The signature is shaky, unlike Mr. Harrington's bold writing from a month ago. Mrs. Price at the post office noticed his letters weakening recently. Why? He was sick, his hands trembling. The will's signature matches that illness, not a forgery." Harold's face darkened. "Then why hide it? That maid got to him when he was weak." Miss Marple raised her hand. "Patience, Harold. Let's look at motives. You needed money. Your business is failing, isn't it? I heard you owe thousands in London." The room gasped. Harold's jaw dropped. "That's private," he sputtered. Miss Marple turned to Clara. "And you, Clara, wanted the house to spite your ex-husband. Your past as a typist in London is interesting. Fired for forging signatures, weren't you?" Clara's face went white. "That's a lie," she snapped, but her hands clenched. Miss Marple's eyes moved to Mr. Gray. "And you, Mr. Gray, hid a draft will that left everything to Harold. Why? And why burn papers with Mr. Harrington's name?"
Mr. Gray's glasses fell to his nose. I cleaning my office," he stammered. Miss Marple pulled out her bag, laying papers on the table. The final will, the draft will, Lucy's letter, the typed notes, and the burned scrap. "These tell a story," she said. "The final will, in blue ink, matches Mr. Gray's pen. The draft will, in black ink, matches Mr. Harrington's older letters. Lucy's letter, also black ink, asked Mr. Gray to protect her. And these typed notes, threatening Lucy, came from Clara's typewriter." The room went silent. Lucy's eyes widened. Clara stepped back, her face pale. Harold glared, his fists tight. Mr. Gray looked ready to faint. Miss Marple continued, her voice calm. "Someone forged the final will, using blue ink to mimic Mr. Harrington's shaky hand. But they made a mistake. The ink didn't match his usual black. And someone broke into the study, searching for the draft will, leaving scratches and a gray cloth. Clara's coat, I believe." Clara gasped. "I wasn't there," she cried, but her voice shook. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Oh, but you were. The groundskeeper saw your flashlight, and Mrs. Green heard you on the phone saying, 'The plan's working. She'll run soon.' You wanted Lucy scared off, didn't you?" Clara's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Miss Marple turned to Mr. Gray. "And you, Mr. Gray, hid the draft will for Harold. Why? Because he paid you, didn't he? You forged the new will, hoping to split the money." Mr. Gray's face crumpled. "No, I didn't mean—" He stopped, his hands covering his face. Miss Marple's voice softened. "Mr. Harrington was sick, yes, but he wrote the real will for Lucy, in black ink, to fix mistakes, as he told her. You, Mr. Gray, replaced it with a fake, using your blue-inked pen. But you kept the old draft, hoping to use it if things went wrong. And Clara, you helped by scaring Lucy, hoping she'd give up the inheritance." Harold jumped up. "This is nonsense. You've got no proof." Miss Marple held up the church key. "This opened your drawer, Mr. Gray, where the draft was hidden. And this burned paper from your bin had Lucy's name. You tried to destroy evidence, but you failed." Mr. Gray sobbed, his shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Harold promised me half the estate. I forged the will, copied the signature. Clara, she wrote the threats to make Lucy run." Clara screamed, "You liar!" But her eyes betrayed her. The room erupted. Dolly gasped, Lucy cried, and Harold shouted, "It's not true!" Miss Marple raised her hand, her voice cutting through the noise. "The police are outside, thanks to Dolly's call. They have the draft will, the threats, and the ink evidence. The real will, in black ink, is safe with the vicar. Lucy is the rightful heir." 2 constables entered, their faces stern. Mr. Gray held out his hands, tears streaming. "I didn't mean harm," he mumbled as they cuffed him. Clara tried to run, but a constable stopped her, her face pale with defeat. Harold slumped, silent at last. Lucy sobbed, her hands covering her face. "I didn't want this," she whispered. Miss Marple patted her shoulder. "You didn't, dear, but Mr. Harrington did. He trusted you." As the police led Mr. Gray and Clara away, the room emptied, villagers whispering in shock. Dolly grabbed Miss Marple's arm. "Jane, you're a marvel! How did you know?" Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. "People leave traces, Dolly. Ink, words, nerves. They tell the truth." She picked up her bag, ready to leave. Back home, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting needles clicking softly. The village was quiet again, the mystery solved. Lucy would keep Harrington Hall, maybe sell it to start fresh. Harold would face his debts, and Clara her shame. Justice was done in St. Mary Mead's quiet way. She sipped her tea, thinking of a case years ago where a forger's mistake was a smudged letter. People thought they were clever, but they always slipped. Mr. Gray's blue ink, Clara's typed notes, Harold's greed, they'd all left clues, and Miss Marple had found them. The village clock chimed 6, its sound warm in the evening. Miss Marple set her knitting down, her heart light. The mystery was solved, and St. Mary Mead was at peace. She smiled. Mysteries came and went, but her village and her sharp mind endured.